Hello, I'm Pop Culture Propaganda. I consumed it, so you don't have.
Don't finish that sentence.
Why not?
Did you clear this bit with legal?
We have a legal?
Yes.
Well, no.
Well, you should run these things by legal.
For what?
Copyright stuff?
This is copyrighted?
I don't know. I'm not legal.
Well, you know what they say. Good artists imitate, great artists steal.
Legal would probably disagree.
Fine. How me get changed then?
No.
This is looking pretty good. Hello. Yeah, it's been a few months since I've done anything. Since then I've rearranged corner a little bit. And yeah, it's really been a few months setback. This has been a long time coming. A bunch of stuff is happening outside of this in the real world. Nothing major. Just work. Work got ahead of me. So yeah, we'll deal with that. And yeah, welcome to the review of Final Fantasy VIII. I'm going to sit here and record until we get this all done. Yeah, this has been a bit of a long time coming. Not just because of stuff going outside work. I had already recorded some stuff a while ago, but I wasn't satisfied with it, and I think part of the reason I wasn't is because there's this. I know that the review for Final Fantasy VIII is going to be different from a lot of the others because I didn't like it, but I still found it fascinating enough to want to talk about it in detail. And the ones I want to talk about in detail, I like very much, and the ones I don't necessarily think I'm going to have a lot to say, I also don't like very much. So this is a weird one where I feel like I have a lot to say, but it's almost all negative. And I don't want this game to set the tone for the rest, so maybe I shouldn't have done it first. But I think that's also the reason why I had to do it first, so it didn't come as a tonal whiplash when I start praising some of the other games people don't like as much, and then come along and do this game and, oh, he just hates 8. Well, yes, but I feel like there's good justification for that. I feel like there's good reason for that, and well, yeah, we'll get into it. Let's get into it. So we're gonna start by talking about the mechanics and a couple other things before I really get into the story, because that way people can avoid spoilers. I'm on a 20-plus-year-old game, but also, you know, I think the bulk of the review is going to be what's wrong with the story, because the mechanics fall into that category of I don't like it, there's not a lot to say. It's really the story where there's a lot going on there. So mechanics. Final Fantasy VIII is pretty garden variety turn-based combat system, as most of the Final Fantasies are, I think, for that matter. So how does 8 function? Well, 8 has these guardian forces, which are these like third party, whatever, who cares, these gods, who give your characters the power to wield magic. And that magic can be junctioned to your stats, so you can be stronger or you can be weaker. Or so you can do certain stuff. It's usually so you can be stronger. I don't think there's a way you can be weaker. I think it's just to get you better. There's a huge issue that is pretty obvious with this system when you start tinkering with it. So magic in most video games, not just Final Fantasy, in most video games, sort of serves as a you'll have a separate health bar just for magic. That'll keep track of how much magic in general you can do, whether your character does healing or attack spells or support spells or any mix of those. It all comes from the same base pool. Well, in 8, they decided, screw that. Each spell is going to have a quantity that you can collect. And that quantity determines two things: how much of it you have, and the potency of your stats when it's junctioned. And immediately the problems form. Because in order to get those magic spells, you have to do this thing called drawing, which is an action you take in combat. When you see an enemy, you go to draw from them, and they might have anywhere between like 2, 3, 4 different spells on them that you can draw. Cool. Most spells you draw about, on average, 5 or 6 or 7, up to 20. Oh, I'm sorry, up to 100. You store 100. That's fucking annoying. That's like really annoying. And I know, there are other ways to get magic, but to have that presented as the first option in your video game, hey, here's this really unfun mechanic. Just stand still, don't interact with anything for like a few minutes. It's fine, don't worry about it. And then you won't have to do it ever again. Well, until you inevitably use your spells. And you need to get more, because all spells are temporary. There is no permanent. You don't restore these when you go to an inn. Not that there are any inns that I remember seeing. Oh yeah, there's a couple. That's irrelevant. Yeah. So the draw system is just flat out not fun to engage with, which the problems begin. But it's also junctioned directly to your stats. So you might have a powerful spell, but every time you use it, your other stats get a little weaker. Now, I've heard arguments that you don't necessarily need to keep 100 of a spell, but at what point do you stop casting the spell so that your attack stays at a good, healthy point? At what point do you stop using Curaga because it's attached to your health bar and you've started to notice your max health went down? So it disincentivizes you from using it in two different ways. One, drawing sucks, so getting any of those spells back is just super, super annoying. And two, your stats going down like that, you just don't want those to go down. Even if it's only a little bit, why would you want them to go down? Now, again, it's easy to get the spells. It's not hard to get the spells. So the argument is just get the spells, but it's just boring. It's just not fun or interesting. And every time I cast a spell, I'm going to be thinking, when am I getting this back? How am I getting this back? Do I even want to get this back? And I don't think that's a good, healthy way to make your system. And I don't know what they were thinking when they implemented it. Probably like, oh, this will be very unique and interesting. And there's people out there who say like, oh, you can experiment with it and figure it out, and that's where the fun is. And yeah, or you can just hit the optimize all button like everyone does. Like, there's no real true experimentation. You know what you want, and you press a button, and it gives you what you want. The other issue with the mechanics is how everything is tied to leveling. So all of your stats are affected by junctioning, all of them, which means what exactly for leveling? What does leveling actually get you? If your stats only go up based on what's junctioned with them? Well, the answer is not a whole lot, really. There's two things that I know for a fact your level affects: the level of the monsters and the level of the ability, magic that they have that you can draw. So, like, say a monster, when you encounter it at level 7, has Cure. When you encounter it again at level 11, now it has Cura. And when you encounter it at level 30, it's now Curaga. Okay. That's neat. So it's tied directly to the draw system. That's super annoying. And yeah, I don't know. The thing that kills it for me, and I proved this on when I did the playthrough. You don't have to level. I mean, I got to level 8 or 9 or 11. I don't remember, but it wasn't high. In fact, that's incredibly low for a game. And at no point was the game ever a challenge for me. It was boring at times. Like it was a challenge in a way that's like mentally exhausting and taxing because of the way I chose to go about it. But like not an actual challenge. I wasn't thinking. I just went and collected the best magic that this one guide showed me where to find it, and just walked through most of the game. After a few hours of grinding, it was nothing. I did another few hours of grinding in the middle, and that's it. Uh, Put on no encounters and just walked up to every boss and story beat after story beat after story beat. Um, which like that's not a fun way to play the game, but it was the best way to play the game. And I don't think playing the game the way the game wants you to play it is fun. And I think that's my inherent baseline issue with the mechanics is you either game the system in a way that inherently just isn't that rewarding, or you play the game by their rules and aren't rewarded for it either. Like it doesn't feel good to do what they want. It doesn't feel good to not do what they want. It just doesn't feel good to interact with this system. Um, and if you're curious as to how you can get high level magic without leveling yourself up, there's this card game called Triple Triad that's in the game that you'll hear people talk about, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, Triple Triad's the best part of the game." I think I was playing a different game than everyone else. So Triple Triad is this little card game where you have like this 3x3 grid, and you and your opponent take turns playing cards in a tic-tac-toe kind of manner, where each of your cards has a value in each of the cardinal directions. And that number determines its offense and its defense all in one. So if I have a monster with a 3 to the right, and you put down a monster here, that monster on that same edge has to beat a 3. Beat a 3. If it ties 1, 2, or 3, nothing happens. If it goes 4 or above, congratulations, you flip over my card to your color, and the person with the most color of theirs on the board at the end wins. It's a majority thing. And, okay. It's fine. It does the job it's intended to do, which is to be a little distraction. But as the game progresses and you go to different areas, there are these different rules that get added to it. There's elemental, there's random, there's sudden death. And the thing that I dislike about it is that at its base value, Triple Triad is tic-tac-toe against a computer with a level of like 3 out of 9. Like it's not a challenging game. It's just tic-tac-toe. If you've played it before, you'll be fine. If you can keep your wits about you, like I've been asleep on stream playing this game and put down cards and just won because I just had better cards, which you will very quickly. Because your reward for winning is you get to keep some of their cards. And even if you lose your card to a computer, you just keep playing that person over and over again, and eventually they'll play your good card, and you can get it back. So it's not like you lose cards forever. When you lose them, it's just annoying to get them back. That's all. But at its base, it's super easy. Not complicated, nothing interesting going on. And at its most complex, it's chaos. It's just not fun. It does these weird arithmetic problems that require like calculus on a college level to figure out. Like I need to have a calculator at all times to be like, okay, so if I put it adds these weird elements that the computer understands. That when I try to understand, it doesn't work. And it still doesn't matter because I still brute force it and win anyway. Because if I lose a match, I just reset and go right back and try again. And hopefully this time, one of two things happen. The rule goes away, or the AI just doesn't play the cards the exact same way. And I win anyway. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's a stupid side mode. I just wanted to address it because I played way, way too much of it. And I feel like it sucks a lot more than people give it credit for. Like I said, the mechanics there's not a lot of depth that's wrong with them. They're just these unfun things that exist in the game. And they're not what's memorable, and they're not what you're going to come back to. They're the things you're going to deal with, like I did, in order to experience the carnival ride that is the rest of the story. And I feel like even if you like the story, and I'm getting to that in a bit, even if you like the story, because that is a subjective thing. I think the mechanics are a little bit objective. Like these are just bad mechanics. But if you somehow like the story, you're still going to want to do what I did to play the game. If for no other reason than it's the only thing that made the game slightly more interesting. It did break the game. It was so incredibly easy. I didn't collect all the magic powered stupid dust I was supposed to. Or I did, I don't necessarily know. What I do know is that at some point I got a card that I turned into an item, and that item was a thing that made my entire party invincible for like a minute. And at that point, there was nothing any boss could have done. Not that they could have done anything anyway, but the game was over once I got that item. I just didn't know it. If you're going to play the game, do what I did. Stick to a low level, play the card game, like game the system as much as you can. Because you'll just have a better time. Not a good time. Not a good time. But a better time. So the story. This is where the game truly gets weird and off the rails. It's just so bizarre to me, every decision that was made for this story. Spoilers until this timestamp. I don't know where it's going to go. Click on that and you go right to my final summarization, I guess, of the game. So, mechanics. Story. The game begins with the main character getting woken up in the hospital from a wound that they suffered at the hands of a bitter rival, because he is a student at a military academy for mercenaries. Okay? And that's immediately where the game loses me. Because it seems like such a stupid thing to hark on. But why is there a student academy for mercenaries? I would get a student academy for soldiers. Specific soldiers to a specific nation. But mercenaries, huh? Is it because you think mercenaries sounds cool? It's probably because they think mercenaries sounds cool. Or it has a lot to do with the fact that there is no nation anywhere. They didn't want to put in the groundwork to establish nations, so there's one city nation. And I call it a city nation because it really is a city nation because it has the one city. It's not. It's got like a few. I'm trying to think what the word is. It's got a prison, got a facility, but it doesn't have anything other than that one main city. Oh, it's occupying. They are occupying another city, another city state. Like there's just city states. Anyways, we'll get into this. So we meet our main character, Squall. And right away, Squall is your typical teenager. He's, sarcastic. He's disengaged from what the authority figures around him want to do. He wears a cool leather jacket, which I didn't do as a teenager, but I would have if I, was built for it or something. Anyway, so Squall is training to be a member of SEAD, which are these like special forces. And he has to take an exam for that. And prior to taking that exam, he has to go to a cave where he has to fight Ifrit. Ifrit being a guardian force. And this is where we're introduced to the concept of guardian forces. And it doesn't quite make sense to me still, ever, what exactly a guardian force is. So you start the game with two, Quetzalcoatl and Shiva. And when you encounter Ifrit, he goes, "Oh, you have Shiva. Oh, ho, ho, ho." And then you beat him up, and he goes, "Okay, well, I'll work with you." And my question is this the only Ifrit in the world? And if so, why is this a test that seemingly other players do? Because there's two people stationed at the front of this cavern for the facility, and they're like, "Oh, hey, yeah, this is the trial. Do you want to do it in 10 minutes, or do you want to do it in 30 minutes? Just like, it was weird. Do you meet Ifrit? And he goes, "Oh, you have Shiva." Ho, 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 ho. Which leads me to believe that they're wholly unique. So why is this considered a big trial? Like, did other people come to this cavern and then get to the end, and Ifrit didn't show up, and they were just like, "Well, you got to the back of the room, so congratulations, you are now competent enough to participate in a war." Which, by the way, that's what this is all about. Is we are taking this exam to fight a god to see if we're good enough to participate in a full-scale battle. Not a war, battle. I guess there is a difference. You get back with Ifrit, you relax a little bit, and they tell you, "Okay, well, the exam proper is going to happen tonight. We are going to go across the ocean, and we're going to help out a city that is being invaded by Galbadia, the big bad people." Okay, sure. I still have issues with this whole concept. Why are we going there? Oh, because we're mercenaries. Why are students going there? Why are students being enlisted to help in a battle? Is it because they're in training and they're almost qualified soldiers? Fine. Although I'm sure that there are child labor laws that say you can't do that. You can train them all you want until they're 18, but until they're 18, they can't fight, can't die for their country, which they're not dying for a country. They're dying for money. Make that very abundantly clear. Is that death is definitely a threat that could happen here because they're worried about it, and yet they're sending children to the front line. Okay, sure, fine. You know what? They're trained. Theoretically, they should be able to handle themselves. How is this an exam? Now, I'm not a big educator, and I'm not big in the military, so I don't know how either of these could function for either a school or a military setting. But don't exams have to be reproducible? Don't there have to be like a controlled way to score everyone? They can change over time. Exams change over time. You get better answers. There are better methods of teaching people. Different teachers have different exam styles sometimes. Although I know now it's a little bit more homogenized, whatever. The point is, exams are supposed to be structured because every single person who takes that exam has to have the same chance of passing or failing. So what is this? Is this like an interview? Like interviews can be a little off the cuff and a little random because like you have to figure out this person. This isn't an interview. This is an exam to see if they can become an elite member of these special forces. And just how do you plan an invasion? Counter invasion. You are the counter force for this invasion. So how does this work as an exam? Do they just sit around until there's conflict and then all of a sudden they swoop in with their student forces, and the ones that survive, they go, congratulations, you didn't take a bullet to the head, so now you get to be an elite warrior for us. Isn't that great? Isn't that fun? And you get to make money for us, because that's how this works. Is you make money for us, and sometimes we give you a little bit of money back, because that's how mercenaries work, I guess. Yeah, they're salaried. Don't worry about it. Like I said, I do feel like I'm harking on this too much because this is only a couple hours into the game, and I'm already at a point where I'm just frustrated with the world setting that they've set up for us. And there's some I still haven't even complained. How do these schools get their students? And I don't ask like how do you convince people. Where are the people? So the school you start with is in Balam, and it's named after the town that it's next to, and it is a town. It is not a city, it is a town. It is a coastal town where their main export is fishing because it's a little tiny hamlet. It doesn't do anything. I don't think there's a mayor. If there is, you never interact with one. You never talk. There's no city hall. There's nothing. There's a harbor. There's a train station, and there's a gas station, and there's a couple of houses. Like, it's not a huge town. So how are there hundreds of thousands of children at this military academy for mercenaries? Like, where do these people come from? There are not a lot of people in this world. There just aren't. And the one place that has a lot of people is the opposing enemy, and they throw their soldiers at you en masse. So where do their students come from? Because their students are not their soldiers, and their soldiers are not their students. They're two separate things. So where do these people come from? Where does everyone come from? There isn't a huge population center. There's no major metropolis city until later in the game in a completely isolated environment. So where do these people come from? It's weird to me, and it's weird that no one's asked that question. Because I get that that's a little bit of a trouble in some of these Final Fantasies is the scope, the scale of things. But like, just show that you have a city. It doesn't. You have to show every person in it. You don't have to show that it's busy. Just show that you have a city. They only wanted to make the one city. They made the one city. They made the second city. They made the second city. And then they said, yeah, we don't need any more cities. We don't need any more giant population centers. We'll just have hundreds of students at these schools. It's fine. We don't have to explain it. We don't have to justify it. Some guy 25 years later isn't going to sit in front of a camera and bitch about the very specific thing that annoys him. So I'm going to move on from this. You come to find out through your party that this invasion is happening because they wanted to go to a communications tower that's in that city and turn it on. And they do. And you fight them, but you don't stop them. You just fight them. And you get away, and everyone's happy. And eventually your mercenary forces push back the invading force. And you find out later that they're like, hey, we're going to stop. We're going to stop invading. Sorry we invaded. We're not going to invade anymore. We did that so that we could keep the communications tower open. So you think you could just keep that open for us? Oh, you're going to do it? Thanks. Awesome. Love it. Few questions. Why? Why are you letting them keep it open? We drove them back. So why are you acquiescing to their demands? So they don't do it again? I mean, we'll show up again. It's fine. Oh, you can't afford it because we're mercenaries and we're not a standing army. So it doesn't make sense to hire a mercenary force that you can't afford multiple times. So, okay, so you're going to give in to their demands, which you could have just given in to their demands right away, but maybe they didn't give you a list of demands, which leads me to my next thing. Why didn't they just ask if they can use the communications tower? Why not just ask? Why not just say, hey, you're not using that thing. Do you mind if we go in with a couple of guys and fix it up? Or don't ask and just have a couple of guys go in, and either spies, like, oh, in the dead of night, like, oh, we turned on the tower and did the thing, or lie, have a couple of guys wear, like, jumpers and just fucking go in there and be like, oh, yeah, we're here to fix a thing. Yeah, we're on orders from the guy in charge of the casino, because that's it. That's the only people. Another city with no mayor, I guess, or whatever. It's just so bizarre that they would put in so many resources and allow so many soldiers to die to do a thing that diplomatically you didn't have to do that. You just didn't. I don't know. There's no explanation as to why they thought, oh yeah, we'll invade. Or maybe they thought, hey, we'll get a town in addition to all of this. It's not like there's a mercenary force that's totally hireable that can stop us at any time. No. We won't have to fight. We'll just invade them and they'll roll over and they'll let us use their communications tower and turn them into a puppet state. Everyone wins. Okay, fine. Whatever. Maybe that was their grand plan. Is they wanted the communications tower and they thought, well, as a consolation prize, we'll get a puppet state. It'll be fine. It's whatever. So we go back and, we pass. The guy who led our party didn't pass, though, because he broke the rules, even though he's the one who found out they were at the communications tower and stopped them from Well, it didn't stop them. Again, they still get to use the communications tower that they turned on. Uh, so yeah, guy gets in trouble. This is Cypher, the rival, the guy who cut your face off. And okay, sure. And it's him not getting promoted that sort of sets up some of the angst that character gets, right? Deserved angst to a degree. Um, at this point, he's been entirely antagonistic, just like bullying Squall and the other school children for no real apparent reason. I guess it's just a power thing. He just gets off on it. But it's supposed to highlight the difference between the two characters. And I'll admit that the character design for some of the cast is really good, and I like Squall. I like his character design at least. And I like Cypher's character. Like Cypher is in the beginning at least, he's something. Is it a good character? No, not really. But is it something? Yeah. And I say is it something because at this point there have been three other playable characters that we've met. Zell, who is this punchy boy, blonde guy who's just full of energy and is like weirdly optimistic about stuff. Selfie, who is this ditzy girl who uses nunchucks or something. And Quistis, who is your instructor, but she's the same age as you. She's just this super talent that got really far ahead. She's already been a seed person for a little while because I guess you can take the exam early if an evasion happens at 15 instead of 17. And yeah, she's your instructor, which is sort of another issue I have. You have the school where they show a bunch of students, and they show you some faculty members. You meet the doctor that heals your face. You meet the headmaster. You meet Zoo, who is like, I guess the assistant to the headmaster. I'm not really clear on that. And Quistis, and like a couple other people that aren't super important. And of all of these people I mentioned, two are seed members, or elite seed members, and one of them is your teacher, and the other one's a vague other person. That's it. You have this program to create these elite soldiers, and you have two. Okay, I mean, sure, fine. I mean, it's only been an active program for 10 years. It makes sense you only have two in this facility, I guess. We meet other people related to Garden, but we don't really meet any other seed members ever. I don't think. I don't remember. It's not important because it's just a bad system. It doesn't make any sense. The mercenary system doesn't make any sense. It's super flawed. Eventually, you find out that you're, now that you're seed, you now have a job. You now have a mission. You've been put on assignment. That assignment is handed down to you from the headmaster himself. So, like, oh, okay, man. And this, I thought when I was hearing mercenary system and like, oh, we went into an armed conflict, I thought the game was going to kind of revolve around this, right? And this is sort of where I hate everything about the setup to the story. Is we've established that we are part of this facility that has campuses all across the world. We are seed. We are these special elite warriors. We're gonna fight the good fight or fight a fight, whatever pays better, and that's going to be the game. We're going to go from conflict to conflict. And nope. Nope, once you're put on to assignment for this next thing, that structure kind of goes away. You don't have to worry about being seed anymore because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The game doesn't care that you're seed. The game doesn't know. It's irrelevant to the plot. It might as well have never happened. The only reason you become seed is so you can go on this mission. And that's it. This mission is the rest of the story. And that seems like such a poor use of the concept. So instead of having these grand adventures of mercenary children doing mercenary war crimes, I guess you just do the regular one war crime and don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So she wants you, this girl that hires you, she wants you to help her kidnap the president of that really shitty invading force that wanted the communications tower open. You're going to kidnap him. You're not going to kill him for some reason. You're just going to kidnap him and convince him to stop occupying this other town. It's completely this other town we're going to right now for the first time, and our job is to rescue this town. Fine, sure, noble cause, pays well. And we get there, and it turns out they're these incompetent teenagers, and you realize, oh, this is why we were sent here, is because they needed structure. They needed some convincing to, like, help them with this plan or something. That's part of our job here, in addition to do the job, is to help them figure out how to do the job. Which seems weird for your newly minted amateur seed, but like I've established, I think this is it. These three people they sent are the options. Oh yeah, so you're there with Zell and Selfie. Quistis stayed back there with Cypher. So this girl, her name is Renoa. And she was set up in an earlier scene as like a potential love interest thing. And, you know, like whatever. That's fine. She's fine. She's a fun character. I'm gonna put her though. She's I think the last character you meet until the end of the game. Because like that's sort of a big issue, is there isn't a huge cast of characters that are interesting past like Squall. There just really aren't. A lot of the characters are these boring, one-dimensional caricatures that don't contribute a lot, that don't do a lot in terms of the plot. And what they do contribute is awful. Just not fun, not interesting, not good to talk about. There's some great character writing in Squall, in Renoa, in Cypher, in Adia. That's it, though. There's a whole B plot, and we'll get to that. But for the main cast, like, there's just so much nothing there. It sucks. Because these are the people you're spending your whole time with. And you have to listen to their dialogues as they sing about trains and they talk about getting hyped up for the next one. And it's just like, yeah, alright. Yeah, this is writing. I don't know. Being nitpicky on that front. So you finally go to kidnap the president through this elaborate train scheme, which is mechanically a lot more complicated than I thought it was, and I don't like that. Because it wasn't fun. It was just bad little mini game. And it turns out, oh, it's a decoy. He's got this weird zombie dude. Weird zombie dude. Cool. Awesome. It turns out the real one's already in the town for some reason, and he's going to make an announcement at the TV station. And this is why they needed the communications tower. And I'll be honest, I've played the game several times up to this point. Several times, like almost half a dozen. I haven't beaten it half a dozen times, but like when you start up a game, you get to like a certain point where you stop playing. This is always before that point. So I've seen this scene multiple times. I edited that episode before I put it up, and I've watched, and I still do not know what the president wanted. I don't remember, and I could look it up. I could look it up right now, but I'm not going to because it doesn't fucking matter. Because I'm still so pissed off every single time that he invaded a nation to make a communications tower operational to announce something to the world. Just send a fucking email. Like, what? It wasn't even an announcement of like a declaration of war. Again, it's something so minor. You could have just like texted everyone. I don't know, man. But you didn't need to invade another city and steal the communications array just to say whatever the fuck you said. What? Maybe I should look it up to see why he would invade. Okay, yeah, it's because he doesn't finish. Okay, so the whole... So Dayling is revealed to be in cahoots with this weird looking mystical woman. And the whole reason for the TV announcement is to say I am in alliance with this woman who no one knows. No one knows who she is. And who she is Sorceress Adia. And this is where we're introduced really to Adia for the first time and sorceresses overall. We're not really explained why the sorcerers are a big deal, but sorceresses are these magical people. They have access to crazy strong good magic or something. It's really vague and remains vague, but they're strong, magically oriented women who are also evil, I guess. Yeah, they're evil, sure. And Adia is the one we meet. And she has befriended President Dayling of Galbadia. Good for him. Good for her. And that's what the TV announcement is. Oh my god, that's so much stupider than I thought it was. And I probably blacked that memory out of my head for that reason. That's so dumb. Again, it's obvious that he invaded Dolet to invade Dolet. But the only thing he got out of it was the communications tower. And that's the only thing he really wanted. Like, he's okay with settling for the communications tower because he'll just go back and invade Dolet eventually because Dolet doesn't have an army because they had to hire an outside army and they can't afford to do that a second time. Everyone knows that. Like, he literally can just show up with tanks and the mercenary force is going to go, well, do you have any money, Dolet? Oh, no. Well, hey, thanks for nice to meet you, new province of Galbadia. It's looking good with the Alcalbadian forces. Yeah, alright, so that's stupid dumb. Um, anyway, so he goes to make this announcement on TV, and Cypher shows up and tries to murder him on public television, which is not a good look. Not a good look. And y'all step in to try and be like, hey, Cypher, maybe don't murder the head of a nation on TV. Even though that's more or less specifically what you were hired to do. And I guess the difference is that you were legally sanctioned to do it by this contract, whereas Cypher is just a rogue agent. Okay, sure, fine. But it's at this point that it is mentioned the name of Garden, the facility that you train at, and everyone's like, Garden is involved? It's just like, at this point I kind of have to ask, well, who else? Who else is there? Who else could be involved? Like you probably have to expect that the people who just stopped your invading force also might be involved in your assassination attempt. And like, they're a neutral party, they're mercenaries. I don't really know how mercenaries fit into the whole structure of war, but from my understanding is they're not a nation. They're not anything. They're specifically nothing and not associated with anything. So how can you consider this like an act of war? Is it like declaring war on the Taliban? It's something like that, right? But this is before that really became like a huge issue geopolitically. So like my question is, are the Gardens a nation? Are they considered that? They must be considered something because he is going to attack them. There's retaliation coming. And yeah, I'm just going to stop summarizing the plot so much because I'm just going to keep harping on these little details. And I think I've illustrated enough so far as to like how this world building just sucks. It just sucks. It's not good. It's not good writing. First of all, it's not good writing, but it's not good. It's there isn't a good world. You have all of these players, right? All of these people who are important that don't contribute much of anything to the overall narrative of the world, and the ones that do, I don't know what their motives are. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And you could say like blanket statement, they're doing it for power, they're doing it for, but there isn't like a stated obvious goal as to what everyone wants. There's only one character so far in the party who Renoa. Like, Renoa has a very obvious goal that she wants. She wants the liberation of this town. And that's good. We want that. We want that too. That's fine. But the other characters are mercenaries. And they're in a mercenary school for mercenaries. And they're teenagers in this mercenary school. And I have to ask the question, why? Why are they mercenaries? Because that's not a light decision. That's not a decision that you're like, yeah, I was thinking of becoming a carpenter, I was thinking of becoming like an architect, but then some guy was like, hey, do you want to die for money? And I was like, wow, yes, I would love that. So you go to a school where they train you how to become the best murder person ever. It just, if these were nations, if this school, the Scalbadia or the Balam Garden, whatever, was for Balaam. And like you were a part of a standing army, but you were above the soldiers, you were above the minutia because you were training to be like an elite soldier or an officer or a whatever. Or if they said, oh, well, this school has the best education, so even if you don't want to become this super elite soldier, you do it for a few years and then you go and start your own company. Sure, whatever, awesome, great, like, something. I need something. And again, if this had been a national thing, you could just be like, oh, for, Queen and Country, who cares? It doesn't need to be a strong reason, but there needs to be a reason. I'm okay with Squall not having a defined, strong reason, and only Squall because they set up in the narrative, they set up very strongly that the whole narrative arc of this character is trying to figure out what motivates him, what gives him strength, what gives him independence. But your other side characters, they need something, anything, because otherwise they're just stats. They're just a part of the game. They're just a line of dialogue. They're not characters. They're not people with motivations. We explore Squall's entire psyche. Well, not his entire psyche. You know what I mean. We explore it from Squall's perspective. So we know that Squall doesn't have a reason. And he doesn't know if that's okay. And he kind of has to try and figure out within himself, like, what is enough? What is a purpose? And do I have enough within me to give others purpose too? Because he becomes the de facto leader of Seed really quickly into the story, which is another issue. The headmaster, turns out, is just a guy. He's just a guy who, like, this is his idea, don't get me wrong. He came up with this. He came up with Seed and Garden and all this stuff. But he's just a guy. He's just an idea man. He's not a maybe he is some huge war person and he did a bunch of stuff back in the day, but right now he's nothing. And he purposefully says, I'm gonna step back and Squall, you can make all the decisions now, Squall. Because you're a natural leader and you can lead us out of this crisis that we created. Why? Why is Squall the chosen leader? Because the main character, the player controls him? Like, it's not a good reason. I'm like going all over the place with this stuff, but I think that's the other thing, though. People complain that Squall's annoying, and I see it. I kind of see why you would think Squall is annoying, because he does spend a good chunk of his time complaining. But he's 17. He's 17, and he's given this huge burden put upon him. Like, oh, you're the leader of mercenary forces. I know you just became an elite soldier, and like, it's been a week. And now you're the leader of all of these people, and you have to tell them that they're gonna die, and like put them to their death. And even if it wasn't a terrible situation, he's a week into the job. Sure, he's been trained for it for a handful of years, but what? You don't get the first doctor that walks into the hospital and say, all right, here are the keys. You administrate the whole thing. That person might be the best doctor you've ever seen. He might be more knowledgeable on every doctor thing that doctors can know. But you don't just put him in charge a week in without proving anything. He's the only mission he's had. Assassinate the president. He's failed. It wasn't his fault, but it failed. That's it. That's the only mission he's had. And now he's running the whole show. Like, again, back to the doctor thing. If the doctor gets the first patient and, like, the patient dies, and it wasn't his fault. It wasn't, the doctor didn't make any mistakes. The doctor did everything that the doctor could possibly do, but the patient dies anyway. It's still not a great look. And you still aren't going to be like, well, you know, you did your best. I guess you're now the head of oncology. Like, so I get why Squall is complaining half the time. Because he should be. Anyone would be. And he's not complaining out loud to anyone. Most of this stuff is internalized. Most of the stuff is him going, oh, I don't know if I should do this. God, I don't want this review to just be a summarization of the whole thing, but I've been recording for an hour, and I haven't even gotten past the first disc of the game. So I'm gonna jump to the two other major issues I want to talk about. But I'm going to really quickly say stuff about Laguna. I don't know why the Laguna story's in there. It's not a bad story. It's not the best story, but it's not a bad story. It's fun. It's a nice distraction. Laguna's a fun character. Not a good character. I want to make that distinction. He's not good. He's not interesting. He's not full of depth. But he's fun. He's fun, and you know what? A fun character, when your main character is not a fun character, it's nice. It alleviates a little bit of the stress of, like, oh, war, to have, like, this happy-go-lucky dude who has the best song in the game, which is not his fault. It's the best song in the game. It's a good soundtrack. That's another thing. I'm going to bury this in the middle of this review so no one will see it. Now I'll probably have to bring it up again, but I am not going to talk about the music at length in any of these. I'm also not really going to talk about the graphics too much at length because I feel graphics are extremely subjective, and you will take a look at a game and you go, okay, yeah, this works or it doesn't. And when the game's 20 plus years old, you accept it's not going to look the best at all times. But the reason I'm not bringing that up is a different reason from the graphics. I find that the music is consistently the best thing in every Final Fantasy. I'm not going to bring it up because, one, I don't know music theory, so my opinions are pretty much just going to be like, oh, it sounds good. Yeah. But two, and I think this is a bigger point, every single review is going to go, yeah, and the soundtrack was good. There's not. The soundtrack is always good. The soundtrack is always good, and in some games it's the only thing that's good, but it's always good. Even when the rest of the game is not good. And not just Nobuo Uematsu, but basically if his name is on a game, it's going to have a good soundtrack. He's just good. That's a blanket statement to 90% of these. I think there's one game that he doesn't do the whole soundtrack, and even then he touches it. But yeah, so like I said, I'm just not going to talk about the music. I will at the end point out my favorite song. Maybe I'll just like highlight it at the bottom. But in some way, shape, or form, I will say what my favorite song was, and that's about as far as I get with the music, because there's just no point in me talking about that at any great length. back to the story. So the last two things I'm going to talk about is the worst thing in the story and the love story aspect of it. I'll start with the love story aspect of it because it's fine. It's not as bad as the worst thing. So the love story. I have a little bit of issues with the way that they handle the romance in this. So it is very abundantly clear early on that Squall has some form of abandonment issues. I'm no therapist, but it's like very obvious that he's unable to form any real attachments with anyone. He doesn't like engage with others. He doesn't try and let himself come out so that others could potentially leave and leave him abandoned and feeling exposed. So he's very withdrawn, and that's fine. I actually like that about the character. I like that the character's a lot more complicated than just like, oh, he's an angsty teenager. It's clear that he went through something tragic happened to it, and never ever addressed it, and he's just kind of kept it in and repressed it. That's fine. It's something. And Rinoa, from moment one, is a character that sees Squall and is like, oh shit, he's hot. And like, yeah, she's not wrong. He's a banger, I guess. I don't fucking know. And she flirts with him. She doesn't flirt with anyone else, so like it's definitely like she's flirting with him because she wants his attention. And it's nice. It's fine, like that aspect of it. It's very natural. It very much feels like, oh, she's a person who sees what she wants and she goes and gets what she wants, and like, hey, good for you. And he's withdrawn, so he doesn't engage with it. He doesn't think about her. He doesn't talk about her. And I think at one point, Rinoa becomes injured. Now, up until this point, Squall has not internalized any thoughts about her at all. He's never said to the player character in his head, like, oh, she's so, pretty, but like, why would she want to be with me? He doesn't have the feelings of self-doubt with her like he has with the leadership stuff. Like, so it's not a thing that's on his mind. She's not a thing that's on his mind. She's not a major part of his world. And even if she was a part of his world in some meaningful capacity, it's on a infatuation level. It's on a like, well, she clearly has something for me, and while I might not reciprocate those feelings exactly, she is cute. I can't deny that. Like he may be thinking that, but he's not even showing that to the player or to any other character. The other characters are more or less trying to get him to get his dick wet because they think it'd be good for him. Which, I mean, they're not wrong. It'd probably be good for him to, like, emotionally connect with another human being or physically connect with another human being. And if you could do both, that would probably be better. But these things take time. They take effort, and he needs to understand himself before he can really truly open up in a way that Rinoa probably wants him to. She probably doesn't want somebody who is going to struggle to like hold her hand until he can deal with his own mental block. So Rinoa gets hurt, and Squall's response to this is so out of character, because, and I say this with no psychology training at all. I took like a couple of courses in college at best, so this is just me extrapolating. This is me extrapolating from a writer's perspective, not from a therapist's perspective. Squall has a trauma episode when she goes into a coma. Again, this is a writer's perspective. Like he is clearly having a breakdown of some kind over her getting hurt on his watch. And he freaks out because he's never going to see her again. He thinks he's never going to see her again because she's in a coma and she might die. And like, okay, yeah. And like it sucks. Like you should be sad. You should be emotional. But Squall so far has not shown that emotion. So for him to show this much emotion, it's clearly him breaking, him having some traumatic episode. And it is played off romantically. Ooh. I don't like that. I don't like that. And I don't think anyone should like that. And I get that that's sort of the writing in the 90s. It's fine to do that sort of thing. But even then, yeah, it still doesn't sit well. It never sat well. And it probably wasn't until I'm more of an adult that I understand why that doesn't work for me and shouldn't work at all. As things progress in the story, Squall commandeers the party to go into a nation they don't know anything about because they might be able to heal her. Okay. And when he gets there, they send her into space because the space station has the healing stuff. Whatever, sure, fine. And in space, things go down, things get bad, and through a series of events that I'm not going to describe because it's A, stupid, and B, will take way too long to get to no point. Rinoa is floating in space in a spacesuit. Okay. Squall is in an escape pod. And he intentionally breaks out of the escape pod to launch himself into space at Rinoa to try and catch her so that he can be with her in her final moments. That's not healthy. That's not good. Like he thinks he's dying for her. Like he thinks, okay, but this is it, we're gonna die. Things might work out, but we're in space, in a spacesuit, tumbling through space. I'm gonna die with you. That's not healthy. That's not okay. And I get that that's supposed to be like this huge romantic gesture, and I just don't see it because you just don't see that sort of thing happen with two people who haven't had a real major super connection this way. Squall, again, has barely spoken to anyone, much less Rinoa. And I guess the line of dialogue is like, oh, he's spoken more to Rinoa than to any of us. It's like, well, yeah, that's a problem. Like, he needs to see a therapist. Don't get me wrong. I do think Squall and Rinoa do work as a couple eventually, but not in this way. And I think that Squall has a lot of issues that he needs to work through before he's ready to be with somebody long term, even short term. And the story has no interest of dealing with that. They just want to have this nice romantic story where he sacrifices himself to save her. Okay. Um, the part that's really frustrating about the sacrifice is that he has no plan to get out of it, and what ends up happening is the what's it called? Spaceship Ragnarok shows up, and it's just like, I'm in space, and they go into the ship that hasn't been seen in a decade or something, and like it's perfectly operational. There's some monsters, and they have to clear the monsters up, but once they do, they have a spaceship. We're not going to talk about that. We're just not going to talk about that. It's stupid. It's like everything else in this story. It just is stupid. It doesn't make sense. There's no setup. There's just there's two things in this, and I think this leads into the next thing. There's either setup with no payoff, or payoff with no setup. You don't get both. You rarely get both. You definitely don't get both. I don't think anywhere in the story. So the worst thing. This encapsulates the whole setup payoff issue in Final Fantasy VIII. So the retaliation to the gardens happen, and a third garden that we've never talked about before, and Balam get blown up, or attempted to blow up. Balam survives the explosions because you intervene, but the other one, Trebia, who cares, doesn't, and they explode. And as far as I know, no one died. Anyway, they evacuated, I guess. They had enough warning. It's just destruction of this facility. Fine. You get there, and people are like, the party starts talking. And one of the characters you've met along the way, who I haven't mentioned because I think he's the last party member, Irvine. He's a cowboy for some reason, who is also a sniper. Yeah, so that's a thing. He is like, oh yeah, this reminds me of when we were all children together. And the party goes, huh? And the player goes, what? And he talks about how, we all used to be part of the orphanage. The orphanage. The orphanage that's never been brought up before, never been spoken of, never been visited. The orphanage. And the party is still confused. Like, no one knows what he's talking about. And that's when another character, I believe Questus, says, oh, it must be because the Guardian forces erase memory. What? That's it? The Guardian forces, these things that give us magic so that we can kind of be a little bit stronger in combat and not use any of the magic, they erase memories? Why are we using them? I get that they're strong, they're good, but it's been shown that out of the three schools, only our school used them. These other two schools didn't use them. That's why that sniper guy can remember stuff, because he isn't from our school. So he wasn't trained with Guardian forces, so he doesn't have memory loss. So he remembers that we used to be orphans together, and he found it weird that we didn't remember that we used to be orphans together. And then just like, oh yeah, it's a known thing. We were all orphans at the same orphanage. And it's... what? Like, what? These two revelations, these two huge things for the story that make, like, pivotal changes in the direction of the narrative, never mentioned before, never set up in any capacity, never alluded to. I think that's a never alluded to. You don't have to say like, oh, like we're not orphans, we're orphans. Like early on, you don't have to do that narratively, but you have to do something, right? At one point, you meet one of the characters' mother, just the mother, and when people ask like, "Oh, where's his father?" be like, "Oh, he died X years ago," which would be before he was born. They'd be like, "Oh, the math doesn't check out," or like, I'm glad I have my baby boy, because like we weren't able to have one of our own or something, and like what? That's like a weird sentence to say about your child, or like, oh, I wish we had pictures of Zell when he was a baby. Like, oh, what happened to them? And like, she never elaborates. That'd be something, right? That would plant some seeds. Or maybe one of the other characters is asked like, oh, like, did you get permission from your parents? And the other characters just kind of stand around and they're like, I think so. I don't know, because they're orphans. Something, just something, anything would have been such a huge way to make this revelation stick and land in a way that mattered. But also, why are you using Guardian Forces if they erase memories? I get that, like, it's memories of your childhood, and like you'll probably forget a lot of what you were when you were 7 anyway. But like, they're unknown. It's an unknown quantity. Like, it's not even a known thing that they do. It's known for Quistis, right? Because she's an instructor and she has to know all the safety bullshit that goes on at those schools. So I'm sure she knows because she's super smart. But Squall didn't know. Selphie didn't. Selphie kind of knew. But like Zell didn't know. They just didn't know. They've been using these things and they just didn't know. And that seems irresponsible to hand your children mercenaries these deadly weapons that makes them lose their memories. Because what if they forget something pivotal like, oh yeah, he's your boss? I guess that's not how it works, because once they remember that they were orphans, all of the memories come flooding back. So they didn't even lose the memories. I guess they just like lost the ability to access the memories without outside help or something. It's not clear. But also, is this supposed to be the drawback? Did we need a drawback for the Guardian Forces? Were the Guardian Forces so naturally overpowered in the plot that we were just like, oh yeah, we gotta mention why they're a bad thing? And we don't stop using them. We're not gonna stop using them. They're useful. Like, mechanically, I guess. So why bring it up? Why bring up that there's a bad element to them at all unless you're going to do something with that bad element? You're not? You just, oh, we lost memories because we just lost memories and this is why we lost them. And that's my issue with the writing overall. At no point is the story good. At no point is the plot good. No point do I feel like we're doing anything or accomplishing anything. And there's like a B story where the characters fall asleep and they wake up in a dream state where they're now controlling different characters. Laguna, Guy, and Ward. Oh god, I should remember the other guy's name because he's got a weird design. I kind of like it, but whatever. That doesn't matter because their whole story. I don't know what the purpose of that story is. It's not a bad story. It's like a fun little distraction. It happens at like good dramatic moments. And when you're like, oh no, what happened to Squall? And then like screen fades back and it's Laguna. We're in the Laguna section now. Okay. Like I said, it's not bad, and it sets up some of the rest of the world. Um, and like that's the thing that's just weird about 8 is there's a lot of these good design decisions. You know, they put a lot of effort into the way the game looks and the way the game feels, but then they wrote a really shitty game. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff here. There is interesting stuff here, you know, like with Squall's entire psyche and persona, and the way that the game plays off of these themes of like destiny and mirrors. Like Squall and Cypher, for instance, are mirrored images of each other, while Squall is very withdrawn and very much like unsure of himself. Cypher is loud and out there, and he knows who he is and is not afraid to be that confident badass that he needs to be. But also in their character designs. Let's see, I'll post an image right here in a second. So when I was doing the thumbnails, I am not a great artist, but so I'm drawing Cammy as the characters, and I'm starting with Squall because obviously he's the main character. And my biggest issue is hands. I think that's a lot of people's issues, hands and faces, which is why I decided to stick with Cammy, because I'm like, I can't make them look like Squall, but I can make them look like Cammy in a Squall jacket, and that's good enough. Anyway, so I'm looking at the hands, and I noticed that Squall, this is my remote, when he held the gun sword above his head, he had his finger up like this. And I kept thinking, why would you have your finger off the hilt like that? Like what is the purpose of the finger being removed? And so I bring it up with my wife, and she does airsoft for a hobby, and it's when I piece it together. It's because it's a gun blade. It's got a gun on it. It's got a trigger. He's got trigger discipline. Now, mind you, the trigger itself is like way the fuck up here. He's not going to accidentally pull that trigger, but he still keeps his trigger finger off of the supposed trigger of the hilt. And in every promo photo I looked, whether not just for 8, but Squall's a popular character, so he shows up in other media like Kingdom Hearts and that fighting game. I don't remember what it was. And in all of them, he's got his finger off the hilt. So I decided to check out Cypher. And in every single image of Cypher holding the gunblade, he is gripping that motherfucker. Because he doesn't give a shit about safety. Safety doesn't matter to him. You know? It's all about expediency and power and strength and Squall's about, following a structure, following the rules, and following the things that society expects of him. And, like, that's, like, the level of detail that they put into, like, a handful of characters, and it's good. It's good that they did that. And then they have Selphie, who's a fine character who does nothing wrong, but other than just like, oh yeah, she really likes trains. I don't know anything about Selphie. She's a nice girl. That's it. What would have been interesting, because later she pilots the Ragnarok, it would have been interesting if it turned out that, like, she's this ditzy brunette, whatever, that's just like, I'm all about having fun. but she's also a really good mechanic who just took apart all the machines and like was really into machinery. That's why she loves trains so much. That's why she can pilot the Ragnarok on site, even though no one's seen an aircraft like this before. Like, that would have been an interesting characterization that they could have added. Zell should have been way more of a mama's boy. I know he's an annoying character, so double down. Make him the most annoying character. It's fine to have those characters. People like them. Do something with it. Quistis is this character who starts off with a lot of introspection and like is an interesting character, but after a while just becomes an exposition dump and doesn't do anything. And Irvine at no point is redeemable. I hate him. I don't. Why does he have a cowboy hat? Why does he have a cowboy hat? Why does he have a cowboy hat? It just, there's no thought into the designs of half the characters, and it sucks. There's no thought into these things. They wanted an aesthetic, and they went for it, and they got it. And then when they were like, well, why do all these things matter? It's like, well, you can't do that backwards. You can't backwards engineer a story. I don't think you can. Maybe you can. Maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. But they clearly started with the design work on Squall and whatever, and they were like, let's figure out the plot after. And I know this because the scar that Squall gets, he was designed with that scar on his face. And when asked why does he have a scar on his face, the designer was just like, just figure it out. You figure something out, it'll be cool. Okay, yeah, fine. And they did something that sort of kind of works, you know. They got Squall and Cypher to get into a fight, and Cypher cuts off his face, and Squall cuts his face back in retaliation. But like, I don't think that's a good philosophy to start your writing with. Just like, oh, we designed it with a scar because the scar is cool, and we'll figure out why he has a scar after. Okay, sure, fine. So in summary, I think 8 is this bed of potential that is just squandered and thrown out for something cool, something flashy, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you start thinking about things that don't make sense, it spirals out of control, and you just end up with this guy ranting about a game he didn't like. It has the seed of an interesting story, you know, as a kernel of an interesting story. And I know why people like this game. And it's not like, oh, they shut their brains off. Squall is a good character, and people want to be a part of that character's story. And this is that story. Because there's a lot in Squall that I think people can relate to, legitimately. Like, it's not a joke or like a meme. I think Squall's a wholly relatable character in a series of completely unrelatable characters. And it just sucks that this is that game, you know? Plus, and the game sucks. The mechanics suck. The mechanics of the game absolutely suck. So, do I recommend you play 8? No. Unless you want to see the story. Like, if you want to experience the story for yourself to determine it, fine. I highly recommend finding a guide like I use that keeps you low level, because even if it's your first time, just do it, because it's not, the mechanics are not worth engaging with on any meaningful level. And anyone that says otherwise is outright lying to you. The story, I think, is worth experiencing, if just once, just to be like, wow, that was a wild fucking ride. But past that, it's not. It's something you can live without for sure. I'm glad that I went through it again as an adult, so I can really understand why the game bothers me so much. But it's there's a lot. There's a lot to hate. So where does it end up in the ranking? Well, since it's the first one, it's number one. Congratulations. It's also the last one, so hey, it's the best and the worst. It won't last long at number one, though. I guarantee it for sure. Because I know what the next game is. You can't see it because of the light. Final Fantasy V is the next thing on the list. So initially, I will definitely talk about this in the before we play. I wanted to have this done before July. So I am way the fuck behind. Because it is now the end of September. So hey, good for me. Yeah. Oh, and my favorite song is The Man with the Machine Gun. I'll play like 5 seconds of it here. It's good. It's good track. It's fun. It's weird that it's my favorite one because it's so not. It's not a. It's. There's no emotional connection with the song. I just like this one because it's the most fun, and I think that's pretty common for this song. It's got a lot going on to it, but yeah, it's just fun. No, it's not a lot. Anyways, yeah, that's the review. This is gonna be a bitch to edit, but I'm gonna go and edit it, and I will post it up hopefully within the next few days. So yeah, thanks for watching. I need to figure out a way to sign out these videos. Bye.